If you work in upper management at an insurance company, you're not going to like this one, I fear. And if I disappear after this series, just remember, I tell my bestie everything. Because we're going to talk about private insurance in Canada, namely what it claims to be versus what it actually is and how it actually works. Allegedly. But first, what purpose does it serve in our healthcare system? Well, aside from making people even more dependent on our healthcare system after dealing with it, which we'll get to, it supplements our public healthcare coverage so that between our private health insurance and our public healthcare coverage, we are fully covered. And being fully covered is important because most of us have bodies, which overall pretty nice, pretty fun, but we can always become injured or disabled at any time. Arguably less fun. And you might remember from when we talked about disability and government, even the most minimal healthcare can be very expensive and not covered by our public healthcare coverage. So most Canadians pay into private insurance through work and trust that if something isn't covered by the public healthcare system, that they can use their private insurance benefits. But you'll know better by the end of this, because you'll have me, a random person on the internet with no personal experience with private insurance. And I'm here to tell you that the last thing that private insurance companies want to do is pay out benefits. And they may or may not go to terrible lengths to ensure that they don't have to. Because something important to remember as we move forward is that in the same way that there's a difference between public health care and privatized health care, there's a difference between public insurance and private insurance. The main difference being motivation, or raison d'etre, if you will. Because while the aim of public insurance is to make sure that people have access to benefits when they fall on hard times, private insurance companies aim to make shareholders extremely wealthy. And they do this by charging as much as they can in premiums, what we call what people pay into insurance, while paying out as little as possible in benefits. Do me a quick favor, look up Canada's top insurance companies and their profits. Needless to say, it's a great way to make money if you care about literally nothing else. It stands in stark contrast to public insurance, like EI or employment insurance, because the purpose of EI is not to make money. Canadians and their employers pay into EI so that if workers fall on hard times, they can receive benefits. This is one of Canada's most important social safety nets. And since its priority isn't to make profits and it's managed by the government, it's generally easier for workers to get benefits. Now, I know what you might be thinking. If we have things like this, then why would we need private insurance? And the answer is, well, it's a bit complicated, but here are the Coles notes. The reality is that our public insurance doesn't generally pay as much as private insurance benefits do. Usually only 55% of what you were making before you became unable to work. And with a maximum benefit that might be kind of low for some people. For example, if you live in a one-bedroom apartment in Vancouver, this would be, well, it would be really bad. So private insurance in this system is kind of a necessity for anybody above the poverty line. And for many people below it. Now, you've probably already caught on to a huge issue with a system that pretty much necessitates that everyone get insurance through work. And that's bad. A lot of disabled people can't work. That's right. The people who would arguably need private insurance the most often have less access to it. Because a lot of disabled people are not able to work the kinds of jobs or hours needed to qualify for private insurance coverage. And remember that living with somebody who does have access to those things, including private insurance, could jeopardize their ability to receive government benefits. And that can put disabled people in an even more vulnerable position. I feel unwell. So, since many disabled Canadians are unable to work, or at least work enough to get private insurance that can supplement their public insurance, while needing to spend more on health care, and having a higher cost of living than non-disabled Canadians, they need to get a little creative. Because many disabilities make it difficult to trade time for money. If you get paid hourly, but you're not able to physically or mentally perform for a lot of hours, then you can't make a lot of money that way. Instead, many people with disabilities sell products. Some sell physical products like art, cross-stitching, or knitting. Others sell services that can, scale. Others, and this is one cool thing about social media, sell content. This can be more accessible to some people because it has a fairly low barrier of entry, and once you create something, you can post it online and have it make money in perpetuity without having to add anything to it. And it's a great way for people with disabilities to be part of the Canadian media landscape so that we can hear different perspectives. And you might have noticed, if you're over 18 that is, that a lot of your favorite content creators are also disabled. There are several good reasons why this type of content and these types of services could be a really good option for some disabled people. Because in the same way that people can record a podcast, put it online, and potentially make money in perpetuity, there's an option to do that with photos and videos. And even though the industry can undergo many changes, especially regulatory ones, there's arguably almost always a market for it. Now, it's really important to note that none of this is easy. Pretty much all of it falls under entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is really hard. And keep in mind that a lot of disabilities really impact the social skills that make selling products easier. But most importantly, remember that there are many people who medically should not be working, but who cannot afford not to, which we'll get to in a second. But first, it would be amazing if you could take some of your favorite Canadian content creators who share content about disability, or who share content about other things and are open online about being disabled. Because one unfortunate thing of many unfortunate things about social media companies is that often, in an attempt to help protect disabled people against bullying, they will block their content. It's much easier and less expensive to hide content that uses terms like disability than it is to go through it on a case-by-case basis. Disability is also highly stigmatized, some kinds more than others, but that's a different discussion. And one of the best ways to help fight stigma is to learn more. So it's really important that non-disabled Canadians actively seek out disabled voices and perspectives. Also, things like the healthcare system, dealings with the government and social services, and private insurance can be and often are very dehumanizing, as can be the less than accessible world that we've created, making it especially important to get to know disabled people. Because they're people. Crazy, I know. And every single human can become disabled at any time. Which brings us to what happens to us when we're working and we have private insurance and everything's really great, but then we become disabled. It's hell. Private insurance would have us believe that disability looks like this. That we're all working our awesome jobs, happily paying our insurance premiums, but since they haven't replaced us all with robots yet, we sometimes get hurt, and then we need to use our benefits, which they will immediately approve and give to us, again, super generous benefits, and we go to treatment, and then we go back to work. But, of course, that's not what disability looks like for most people. Not that insurance companies are incentivized to know that or care if they do. And they do, and they don't care, allegedly. Part of the reason that disability doesn't look like this for most people is that this perspective sees disability as a kind of employment status above all else, when you and I know that disability is so much more than that. Another problem with this interpretation of disability is that it sees it as something having a beginning, middle, and end, with the end being that somebody's well enough to return to work. And you might be thinking, but Bailey, insurance is a business, so of course the perspective is going to be a business perspective. Yes, thank you, I know that. So sue me if I beg for a little humanity, but also please don't sue me. Yes, insurance is a business, a big business, and they're incentivized to see disability this way because that's what makes them money. But it's really important for all Canadians to understand that disability doesn't usually look like this, and that dealing with insurance more realistically looks like this. Significant delays in processing claims, a significant number of claims being denied, and sometimes legal battles. Because again, private insurance companies do not exist to help people during hard times. They exist to make money off of people who are scared of falling on hard times. So it would make sense that they wouldn't really like this part of the process and would want to keep it as short as possible, and they would love this part of the process where they'd get monies. Which is why many insurance companies allegedly maybe probably use this strategy to help reduce the time that people are on leave and get them back to work and paying benefits even if they are not medically cleared to do so. They will allegedly delay the processing of claims and ask for unnecessary documentation and other confusing things in hopes that people can't afford to wait and give up right away. And even when people don't give up Ben, insurance will deny a lot of the claims they receive in hopes that people will not go through with an appeal. Because an appeal would be even more time without any income, so a lot of people, unfortunately, even though they're not medically cleared to do so, are forced to go back to work, where they pay insurance premiums. And it's basically a lot of that over and over and over again, not only for short-term disability, but also for long-term disability, which is usually medical leave that's longer than 6 months. But even if you do qualify for long-term disability, insurance will usually not leave you alone. Because here's the thing. From the moment that you called insurance to let them know that you needed to use your benefits, they have been trying to figure out how to get you back to work. While you and your doctors have been focused on your medical reality, the insurance company has been exclusively concerned with the legal reality of your medical reality. Allegedly. And they've been collecting as much information about you as possible, some from your doctors, and some from you directly in the form of incessant phone calls and email communications, all in the hopes that they find something that they can use to force you back to work. Sometimes they'll even hire someone to surveil you in person and online. But to be honest, allegedly, even if they can't find anything because you are genuinely disabled and unable to work, which, by the way, is pretty much everyone in this situation because who the fuck would go through this if they didn't have to? They will send you a gradual return to work plan regardless of your medical records. Or they'll book you an independent medical evaluation in hopes that that assessment will provide them with something that will allow them to end your benefits. And at this point, people have the opportunity to appeal the termination of benefits, but most are unsuccessful. And something really important to note about this process is that at every single stage of it, an insane amount of people, all needing help, are dropping off. And that's valid. That process is a kind of psychological hell that is far too much on top of already reckoning with disability. But every once in an Aries, Moon, Sun, and Mercury, you have someone who would rather die than let the bad guys win. When you decide to sue a company that has hundreds of billions of dollars, a bunch of things happen. But most importantly, it becomes very clear very quickly that the tactics that have been used against you so far to get you to give up were just a warm-up. Allegedly. And that you're going to need to exploit all of the resources at your disposal in order to win. And to be clear, I'm not saying that you need these exact resources in order to be successful, but I'm also not going to lie to you. Or maybe I will. Maybe all of this is a lie. Elephant in the room, our world is fucked, and all these things are helpful when navigating the justice system. Because, infuriatingly, certain demographics have a much easier time accessing healthcare. And having access to quality care, including specialists who are also willing to fill out a lot of paperwork, is a crucial part of a lawsuit. That paperwork, likely years' worth, will come back to haunt you for better or worse during discovery. Also unfortunate is that a lot of billion-dollar companies are run by men. And a lot of the lawyers who've decided to dedicate their lives to representing billion-dollar companies while tearing down disabled people, allegedly, are also men. So it's very helpful if you know how to stand tall around men who are doing everything they can to discredit you. Or if you're unable to do that, you can make sure that you have people in your life, like lawyers and friends and family, who definitely know how to do that. Now, this is arguably the most important resource and the greatest barrier that people with disabilities seeking justice face. Because remember how we talked about the delaying and denying being so effective in getting people back to work since most people can't afford to go weeks or months without knowing what's going on if they're approved or if they have an income? Well, what if I told you that these lawsuits in Canada could take up to 10 years? And keep in mind that the second you make any kind of income, it can be used against you. Even though you and I and medical experts know that there are certain types of work that some disabled people can do in small amounts or in short bursts, and that a lot of workplaces are not accessible, insurance will try to use anything, and I mean anything, to argue that you are not disabled. Continued learning, hobbies, and social life can all be used against you, even if those things are literally part of your treatment. And so many of Canada's most vulnerable get trapped in this fun little cycle. As if disability isn't stressful enough. Not only are disabled Canadians at higher risk of abuse and exploitation because of how government benefits and taxes work, but if they also need to navigate this timeline with private insurance, That puts them at even higher risk of intimate partner violence, including financial abuse. And remember, these types of lawsuits can be very isolating. The constant threat of surveillance and having your written communications subpoenaed can make it very difficult to reach out. And this is awful, but if you have stressors like this indicated anywhere in your medical records, then insurance companies can use that to argue that that's what's causing any undue distress, deflecting from the absolute evil shit show that this is. So a lot of disabled people navigating lawsuits suffer every single day in silence. And it can be a lot of days. Oh, sorry, I mean a lot of days. So hopefully it's starting to make sense why some people, when bad things happen to insurance companies, are less than empathetic. Now, this resource is incredibly helpful in a couple of contexts, because this process is all about reasoning and philosophy, honestly. You basically need to be extrapolating all of the time. And unfortunately, a lot of disabilities can negatively affect this. And often ones that have a positive impact on it come with things that undermine it. So, situations like this one can be especially distressing for people with disabilities. Because in a deposition, the enemy lawyer is trying to gather as much information from you as possible in order to help build their client's case and destroy yours. And they will use every tool at their disposal to try to get you to give answers that will fit with their narrative. And lawyers have a lot of tools. They go to school for a long time to acquire them. Many of them are strategic little word wizards with excellent communication skills and the ability to adapt their tactics on a whim. So, if you get off on having to stay as cognitively sharp as possible while your nervous system is going crazy and you're playing expert-level people chess with the highest stakes imaginable for hours and hours and hours, well, everyone has their things, and you might love being deposed. But a lot of people don't like psychological torture. Because in depositions, a lot of really hard stuff comes up, and a lot of things that can feel very violating. Like your very sensitive medical information, which at this point has been collecting for years, remember? Oh, and a quick note on that. Imagine how much it messes up the dynamic between a patient and their medical team, knowing that everything that's said in appointments will come back or will come up in situations like a deposition. So not only are you isolated from the outside world and friends and family, but also your medical professionals to a certain degree. And then there's surveillance. And this can be very triggering for a lot of people, especially for certain demographics like women. Because a lot of times they already feel a sense of being hunted or a hyper-awareness about the possibility in person and online. So being shown photos that you weren't aware were being taken, or hundreds and hundreds of pages of screenshots of all of your online activity can be very weird. And very upsetting because sometimes memories are hard. But the hardest thing for a lot of people with disabilities in this situation is talking about their disability. Because remember that from the moment you become disabled, all of this stuff in this bullshit timeline become the priority with high stakes. Not exactly your health. So, for some people, they could be years into the timeline and still have not started processing their disability. And as we all know, disability brings up a lot of big questions. Like, what is this disability and where did it come from? I mean, have I always had it? What does it mean for me moving forward? Can I go back to what I was doing before? Did I even like my career before, or did I just like that it helped hide my symptoms? Do I tell people that I'm disabled, or would they just feel sorry for me? Do I even like the people around me now, or is it just survival because I'm disabled? Can I manage this type of pain? Is life with this disability even worth living? Lots of hard questions I can imagine. But there is some good news. Because if you've survived until this point, which, remember, a lot of people do not, then there may or may not be a good chance that your case is strong enough to start looking at settlement. Because while you've been, dying, your lawyer has been very busy trying to speed the process along and scare the shit out of the insurance company, making it very clear that you are not backing down and not afraid of trial, even though you're kind of afraid of trial. Because remember that some disabilities are very complex and highly stigmatized. And some of the symptoms can be confusing. And even though court proceedings for these types of cases are usually able to be kept private, some people might still be nervous about what other people might think of their very personal medical information. But most importantly, one reason why many people are afraid of going to trial is that they're afraid of the wait. So for a lot of people, if they're able to get what they want before going to trial, they might opt for that. Now, one more thing that I'll say, as I may or may not be able to say too much more, as a random person who may or may not have personal experience dealing with private insurance, is that this process will change your DNA. Not only because of how long it can be, even with an express pass, but because it will more than likely have a huge impact on how you see and move through the world. And my hope for you, if you're going through this right now, is that yes, you will approach all the parties involved and the process from this stance, but that you'll also try your best to remember this.